And good afternoon. Welcome to the Countdown to Obamacare webinar series. Today is Thursday, November 6th, and today we're going to be talking about the affordability safe harbors. And you've probably heard by now there's some debate going on over whether that safe harbor is 9.5% or 9.56%. And today I'm going to give you the answer at the end of the webinar. So let's jump in. And again, my name is Kaya Bromley, and I am the president of Your Obamacare Advisors and the author of the book, The Employer's Guide to Obamacare. It is available on Amazon, and it basically breaks down the law into easily understandable steps so that an employer or someone advising an employer can very easily master the basics of the law, because the law is very complicated, as we all know, but there's only a few finite things that an employer needs to focus on, and then they need to know where to go for help. But by having those basics down, it helps them to make sure that they're getting the right advice and getting good advice. So I recommend that if you want an overview and a really quick understanding on how to implement the law. And this webinar series is being sponsored by Freedom Care Benefits, which is a self-insurance solution, and it's the best solution that I have found for business owners who have a large number of employees that they never offered insurance to before, and they now have to figure out how to offer them insurance. So especially if you have clients or you are in fast food, if you are in hospitality, if you are in farm labor, if you're in any service industry where you've got a lot of either minimum wage or lower wage workers, and even if you've got higher wage workers, it's a great strategy because there's tax planning benefits to this program, and it also allows you to guarantee your ACA compliance. So if you're a broker listening to this and you do not have this in your arsenal of options for your clients, I strongly recommend it. I am an independent organization. I'm an independent attorney, but I have advised Freedom Care extensively on ACA compliance and have worked with them, and it's a very strong, solid program that has been written about by numerous attorneys across the country on the legitimacy and the quality of this strategy for employees that fit in that demographic. So I strongly recommend checking that out if you have not already. And as always, my warning when I start these webinars, this is not a substitute for legal advice. I'm going to give my legal opinion about the affordability rules, but if you really need to do this analysis for your own organization, and you need to do it very quickly because, as you all know, the exchanges are opening next week, November 15th, and it's especially critical that employers have their strategy in place. Open enrollments should have already started, if not starting very soon. So you need to really get your head around this. And I always say don't panic because that's not constructive, but you really do need to be acting. The time has run out to sit on the sidelines and think about this. And the penalties are for real. That's how the whole law is going to be funded. So don't think that it's not going to happen to you. Okay, with that, let's jump in. So what does it mean to be affordable? I'm not going to go into the background. You can go listen to one of my other webinars to understand the employer mandate and the requirement to offer insurance. But one of the requirements in order to avoid penalty is that the insurance has to be affordable. So let's just go, this is just a refresher, but in order to avoid penalties, the insurance has to be affordable and provide a minimum value. Affordable means that employees may not be required to pay more than 9.5% of their household income for their coverage. But of course, how is any employer supposed to figure out what their employee's household income is? Well, the IRS, in order to assist employers in figuring this out, created 3 safe harbors, and that's what we're going to cover in this webinar. So, but before we get into that, let's talk about the penalties if coverage is not affordable, because this is really the critical piece, and this is why we need to make sure that the insurance is affordable. So the penalty we call this penalty B, but the penalty is the lesser of penalty A, and the penalty A, to refresh your memory, is $2,000 per full-time employee if only one employee goes to the exchange and gets coverage. So it's the lesser of that penalty, or $3,000 times the number of full-time employees who receive a subsidy or a tax credit from the exchange, okay? So it's triggered by each employee who goes to the exchange. There's no, remember, if you remember back to penalty A, there was you get to deduct the first 30, 80 next year as a transition relief. And you get relief in terms of a margin of error rule. You only have to comply with a certain percentage. None of that applies to this rule. This is every single person who goes to the exchange, you pay $3,000 if you did not offer them affordable coverage. So let's talk strategically speaking, though, because there's some things there's some misconceptions about this. So if you remember the less 80, I just talked about that doesn't exist for this particular penalty. And it only has to be affordable for full-time employees, not their dependents. So in other words, employers can offer affordable coverage to the employee, but then require the dependents to pay full price for that coverage, and that still would satisfy that mandate. One of the strategies that we're seeing some people do is making the insurance affordable to some people, but not to other people. And I'm not having an ethical conversation about whether that's right or wrong, because if you don't offer them coverage, then they can go to the exchange and get subsidized coverage or possibly tax credit. So that is a very viable strategy. And what you would do to figure out that calculation is you would figure out, okay, if you offered insurance to this segment of your employee workforce, but not other segment, what would that, and every single one of them went to the exchange and got a subsidy, what would your costs be? So that's a viable calculation to do, but you also have to consider in doing that morale. This year you don't have to consider employee discrimination as it relates to the ACA because those rules haven't come out yet, but you do need to consider any other employment laws, ERISA law, anything else. So you want to check with your employment lawyer before you do a strategy like that, but it could be a way to save a lot of money. Well, the other thing too, I introduced it earlier, Freedom Care. Freedom Care, or any kind of skinny plan solution, and Freedom Care is not just a skinny plan, but if you are doing a skinny plan solution, that's a way that does not satisfy this B penalty. It only satisfies the A penalty. Freedom Care, on the other hand, does satisfy both the A and B penalty. And when we're talking about affordable minimum value, that's what you hear of as the bronze plan, okay? So let's talk a little bit more about strategy. Some people are thinking that they're going to charge every single employee 9.5% of their income. That's a big no-no. That doesn't work. What you can do, though, is you can create different categories of employees, and then you apply that calculation consistently and reasonably for each specific category. These categories are not made up. It has to be a bona fide category, and these are ERISA approved categories. And this is another place where there's a lot of planning that can happen. So let me give you an example. So if if you haven't done this categorization and you haven't created a plan document and properly documented this throughout your hiring practices and your employee handbook, you can only charge one premium for your entire workforce. And if you've got a minimum wage worker and a very highly paid worker, you're going to make that insurance very low cost, and you're going to pay a lot for your higher wage workers. So by creating different categories, you can charge different 9.5% for each category. So if you're doing the numbers in your head while I'm talking, you can see how that can be an exceptional cost savings for the employer. And don't underestimate the consequences for getting this wrong or not documenting it properly, because there's ERISA issues. You're going to have wage and hour issues. There are still non-discrimination rules that apply just in general ERISA law. So you can't just do this willy-nilly or not take this very seriously. Also, as long as we're on this, I'm going to talk very quickly about plan documents. You've heard me talk about this at other times. This was something that was always required, but no one really was talking about it. And now the Department of Labor is actively auditing for this. This is where this comes into play. Your plan document is where you're going to specify how your benefits are administered, your categories of employees, how you are going to defend yourself if you're ever questioned on that. So a little bit of time and effort put in right now can save you massive amounts of headache and cost later, because this is something that is going to be looked at. So this is so that's a really important thing to keep in mind. So now, with no further ado, let's get into the affordability safe harbors, and I'm going to go through each one. The first one is the W-2 safe harbor. For this one, in order to be affordable, the contribution for the employee's self-only coverage, remember, not dependents or spouses or anyone else, just the employee's coverage, cannot exceed 9.5% of the employee's W-2 wages for the calendar year. And I'm going to get into the pros and cons in the next set of slides, but let's just go through these definitions real quick. So it's box 1 of the W-2 for the calendar, the W-2 safe harbor. Number 2, the rate of pay safe harbor, obviously a little bit more complicated. You take the hourly rate of pay for each hourly employee and multiply that by 130 hours per month. And then the coverage is affordable if the contribution is 9.5% or less of that monthly wage. There's a little bit of a difference here if you're talking about an hourly employee or salaried employee. So so you want to be careful of that. It's not the same. You don't calculate it the same way for both. Then there's the federal poverty line safe harbor, which is coverage that is affordable if the employee premium contribution does not exceed 9.5% of the federal poverty line for a single individual. This one it results in a very low cost coverage, so it's not as, in fact, I haven't seen anybody use this. I'm sure there are some situations, but just the clients that I work with, I haven't seen this used, but that doesn't mean that there isn't circumstances where this would be used. So now I broke down for you the pros and cons of each of these strategies, okay? So first of all, the W-2 pros and cons. So this one, the first pro is obviously that you get to count all of the hours that someone works. You get to count paid holidays, vacation, leave, everything. As opposed to the next one that we talk about where you limit it to only 130 hours. So this is a real calculation of all the hours, and sometimes, in a lot of instances, this is a very desirable way to do the calculation because the employee's contribution is going to be higher. The cons of this, though, is that you're not going to know that number until the end of the year. And the other con is that you're only going to include taxable income. So if they've made deferrals like 401k or cafeteria plan, those don't get added back into box 1. So it could end up in certain circumstances that I've actually seen where the W-2 income ends up being less than rate of pay, depending on your workforce. So don't have someone tell you, oh, just do this one or that one. You need to do the calculation both ways and see which is best for you. Because intuitively, I thought that W-2 was going to be better for one of my clients in particular, and he did the calculations both ways, and rate of pay was actually better for him. So, and I was very surprised because it didn't make sense intuitively to me. So you need to do this calculation and see which is best for you. So rate of pay pros and cons. So in this one, you're not waiting till the end of the year and then you have to go back and fix you have to true up your numbers and either have your employee pay you back or you pay them back. Then you get into wage and hour issues. That's something that was not an expected thing that has come up, but it's something that you need to watch out for. So in this situation, it's real time. So you're calculating affordability at the beginning of the year. So one of the pros that I didn't write on here is you're probably avoiding any wage and hour issues that could come up as a result of having to go back and say, hey, we didn't charge you enough. So then the cons of that is that, so if the employer reduces the employee's rate of pay during the year, the rate of pay must be applied separately to each calendar month. Okay, so that's a little bit of an administrative issue. And then also, if the employer may only multiply the hourly rate by 130 hours, regardless of whether or not the employee worked more. So remember, in the W-2 section, I was explaining that you're actually counting the hours that are actually worked. And this one, you're using a multiplier. So even if they worked many more hours than 130, you only get to count 130. And so that's why I was saying earlier that you need to really do this calculation in your workforce, because no one understands this like you do, or the people that work for your organization. So be very careful. I've read a lot of commentary where someone says, oh, if you have hourly employees, you should use the rate of pay. Well, that's not always true, and vice versa. So make sure that you take a look at this for your own organization. Now, federal poverty level, pros and cons. Again, I talked about this just a little bit briefly. It's an easy calculation, and if it works for your organization, and this, you've got a lot of minimum wage workers, perhaps this could work. I haven't seen it work yet. So, for example, the cons. If you're doing it based on a rate of pay for an individual, the maximum employee contribution would be $92.38. The implications for this is that you are paying the difference of that insurance, so the cost to you could be prohibitive to use that calculation. So I'm not going to spend too much time on that. And if you know someone that has used this calculation and it made sense, I'd love to get an email from you to learn about it, because I'm learning every day too. Kaya at yourobamacareadvisors.com. So number 5, what is the 9.5% rule, and how does the 9.56 adjustment impact large employers? This is an example, by the way, of the scary things that I see in the ACA. I see things all the time on the internet. If you Google this, you'll find articles where some people say the affordability test requires you to charge 9.56%, and some say it doesn't. I'm going to give you the answer as far as we know it under the law today, but so this is the reason why you really need to be careful just Googling things. And this is from several very well-respected attorneys will say different things on this. So be careful where you're getting your advice. So first, let's go to the 9.5% rule. This is simply a regulatory device. The IRS the purpose of this was that the IRS wanted to make it easier for figure out affordability, because they were never going to understand household income. In nothing that the IRS put out did it ever say that there would be an adjustment to this multiplier. It's simply a regulatory device. It was not changed by anything that has come out since. So the affordability test, the safe harbors, are 9.5%, have never changed. The 9.56 rule has never been applied to the affordability safe harbor for employers. 9.56 is in regards to the calculation for an individual's eligibility for a tax credit. So what Congress did is it told the IRS that they were going to have to adjust that eligibility number to reflect the rate of medical inflation. So it happened to be that in 2013 it matched the affordability number, 9.5%, and then it was increased to 9.56% in 2014. It'll be increased again. But that number had nothing to do with the affordability safe harbor. And unless the IRS comes out and expressly says that it does, there is no reason, no logic, and no reason to read into that it changes the affordability safe harbor. So every attorney that I work with, and we're advising our clients that the affordability safe harbor is 9.5% unless the IRS explicitly comes out and says otherwise. So the confusion is they've created a little bit of a loophole. So it's not a great loophole, it's very small, but there is a situation where an employee could be offered affordable coverage from the employer and still qualify for a tax credit if the public exchange coverage is between 9.5 and 9.56% of that employee's household income. So it could be a good thing for the couple of employees that fall within that loophole, but it's not big enough to make a huge advantage. And also, everyone's so confused about this that there's probably very few individuals who would even figure this out and fall within it. It would be a very hard target to hit. And like I said, there's tons of misinformation circulating about this, so just be careful. And this could change. The IRS could come out and say, no, the safe harbors do follow the inflation adjustment, and in that case, then we will follow that. But until then, there's no reason to change what you're doing. So that's it. That's one of our shortest webinars, but this is a really important topic, and I've been getting tons of emails and questions about it. So I hope this was useful. Join us next week for the next installment. And as always, thank you to our sponsor, Freedom Care Benefits. Like I mentioned, if you are a broker and you don't have this program in your arsenal yet, I strongly recommend it. It's one of the best strategies out there that I've seen. If you can contact them directly, or you can feel free to contact me, and I'll put you in touch with the right person. My email is kaya@yourobamacare.advisors.com, and we also, our organization is also a full-service consulting firm, and we help employers of all sizes to get in compliance with the law. Please feel free to contact us if we can be of any help to you. Thank you so much for joining me this week, and have a great day.